My name is Angie Mata, allied worker, a member of the Transport Workers Cooperative, and an organizer of the National Confederation of Transport Workers Union in Cebu City, Philippines. Whenever we bring up that issue of just transition in a conversation about climate change, people ask us, but what exactly do you mean by just transition? Even our own public transport member used to ask that questions. We can now confidently answer that question. We know that the future is public transport, and here is how we are organizing a worker-led just transition in the Philippines. Jeepneys are the Philippines' most traditional form of public transportation. We got the most of them after the World War II when American troops left their jeeps and we recycled them into an open-air passenger vehicle. Jeepneys are the cheapest form of transportation and account for the majority of public transport vehicles on the roads of our country. Jeepneys are so popular that they have become a cultural icon of the Philippines. Jeepney workers are often informally employed. They do not have fixed income and have respiratory illness from the fumes of their vehicles and are often blamed for the chaos in our streets. In spite of all this, we are proud of the work we do, and we know that we are essential to confront the climate crisis. After all, expanding public transport will need to be a consistent response in every city to challenge the climate crisis. In 2016, the government of the Philippines, headed by Rodrigo Duterte, announced that they will be pushing for the Public Utility Vehicle Modernization Program, announced as a comprehensive system reform that will entirely change the public land transportation industry. The program aims to restructure all the land transportation to reduce carbon emission in the cities and in the country. Although the program refers to all land transportation, the government decided to focus especially on the jeepneys. The PUV modernization program focused on the phased out of 240,000 traditional jeepney, putting almost 500,000 jobs at risk of displacement. We knew that we needed to do our part to confront the climate crisis. After all, jeepney workers suffer the consequence of climate change on a daily basis. But the PUV and modernization announcement put our back against the wall. We had to protect thousands of workers whose livelihood depends on the operating jeepneys. That's when we turned the crisis into an opportunity. Our first decision was to go on strike, a national just transition strike. In 2017, we said, no modernization without just transition. We wanted to be a part of the modernization program, but guaranteeing that we would not lose our livelihoods along the way. Thousands rally around the country demanding support for jeepney operators to be able to integrate into the modernization program. Workers needed financial support to be able to buy new jeepneys, priorities for workers' cooperatives to get the roads that they are working on, and more time to be able to adapt to the new program. It was not easy, but through persistent mobilization and negotiation with the government, we managed to reach agreement and get concession from the government. We got a 3-year moratorium period, financial support for buying new jeepneys, and the formation of workers' co-op that would have priority in the bids for new routes. Then we got to work. Then came the difficult task of convincing our own member to organize in cooperatives, changing from the most individual form of work to a collective one. We needed workers to band together so that we could have the minimum of 15 jeepneys to be able to bid for a route. We also needed workers to pull their resources together and make financial plans and adapt their work schedules. It was, and still it is, a cultural shift within the public transport sector. This was their bread and butter for the longest time. We had to do a lot of work to explain that this was our only chance to transition, that the cooperatives would provide stability to workers, and that collective ownership was the only way we are going to keep our livelihoods. The transition on the ground may look different from cities to cities. In my city of Cebu, we have organized 12 different transport cooperatives so far. Over 2,000 workers are part of them, and so many things have changed. Workers went from an individualized working day when they did not interact with their peers more than to compete over passengers, to a system of collective organizing. They were now part of a common collective project. They used to be directly affected by air pollution from their vehicles, while now they are driving cleaner units, improving the health of themselves and their passenger. They used to be mostly informal, without a fixed income, without social security coverage. They now have fixed income, fixed hours, overtime pay, and especially important, access to social security. Workers did not participate in the decision regarding their routes, nor the working condition. They are now in charge of themselves, making the most relevant decision for their livelihoods and of the repercussion this decision on the passenger. The jeepney sector did not employ many women. Most of the drivers and operators are still men. But in the jeepney co-ops, we are changing those dynamics. Women are integral to the work of the co-ops, in the office and in the buses. In so many different ways, change has been transformational. What jeepney workers are doing in the Philippines comes from the ground up, based on our history, our culture, and our local circumstances. But we know that we are part of something bigger. In cities around the world, public transport workers are coming together to ensure that our sector is at the heart of climate action. The NCTU is affiliated to the International Transport Workers Federation. Together with C40Cities, ITF has launched The Future is Public Transport campaign to re-energize our sector. At the UN Climate Conference in Glasgow, mayors, unions, and civil society groups worldwide joined together to demand huge investment to public transport in the years ahead. Public transport is good for the planet, and it's also good for communities everywhere. As we're showing it in the Philippines, communities can take control of their own lives and livelihood at the same time as fighting climate change.